Hey guys, good evening. Meteorologist Erica Lopez here. We are awaiting Tropical Storm Mindy landfall. It is very close to landfall in the Florida Panhandle. So let's update you on what's going on through the MyRadar app. So you're seeing the center of circulation very close to the Florida Panhandle. It's near the city of Apalachicola, Port St. Joe as well. But that center of circulation definitely getting more defined as it makes closer approach to the Florida Panhandle. So right now what we're seeing with Tropical Storm Mindy is 16-mile-per-hour winds right now sustained in Apalachicola. Very low-end tropical storm, but still a major issue, especially in this part of Florida, because they have received a lot of rain already so far this year. Previously this year, they already had a couple of storms go through that area. For example, Tropical Storm Elsa, Hurricane Elsa, that was out in there as well. So definitely a storm that we're watching. So you're seeing those sustained winds right now at 16 mile per hour. And this did come up pretty quickly. It was just named at the 5 p.m. advisory as a tropical storm. And you're seeing that water temperature. That might play a part in why we did see this quick spin up, and at least in terms of the circulation getting a little bit more defined. The wind shear wasn't as prominent in that area as well. So that's why we're seeing this tropical storm. And what we can expect, at least in terms of wind over the next several hours, as this does near landfall, we may see up to 30-mile-per-hour winds, even gusting up to 40 with this system. But as it makes its inland approach, it will definitely leave a lot of rain over this area, and then eventually it'll go out to sea. And then that's when we'll see it weaken even more back into a tropical depression. So something definitely to watch, especially for this part of the country. But playing it out, putting this in future mode, you could see all the rain in association with this. So by 9 p.m., it's already made its landfall. At least that's what the HER is saying, that high resolution future radar. And then you can see how it makes its inland approach. A lot of the bands, if you notice, they're all going all across parts of Florida. So for example, Tampa, Orlando, you may see a little bit of tropical moisture in association with this system actually hitting those areas. And then again, you're seeing more of that rain and tropical activity and moisture still lingering there in South Georgia, and then eventually pushing out to sea, but you still see a lot of that moisture on the back end. So it doesn't mean that you're out of the woods. You will see a lot of rain and a lot of tropical moisture come in with this system. And if we take a look at what's happened over the past 6 hours in terms of our infrared, you can see how a lot of that convection started to pop up, and that's when we got a little bit of that center of circulation in those areas. So let's take a look at a couple tower cameras just before it makes, I guess before we can't really see anything out there, but when we were looking at it before. But first one we're going to take a look at is Port St. Joe. So this actually might be the location where it makes landfall, might be a little bit more south, might be very close to this area. It's really dark right now, but earlier you could see those clouds as sunset has occurred. The next camera, St. George Island in Panama City, you can actually see a little bit of that wave action going on there near the bridge. And then you're seeing, yeah, especially those clouds coming in as well. A lot of that tropical moisture, a couple of cars out there on that bridge, but you could definitely see the wind starting to pick up in that area. And this is again from Panama City, Florida, St. George Island Bridge. And then the next tower camera I want to show you, we're going to go to St. Teresa, Florida. So all of these are actually in the Panhandle. You can see that sunset kind of colors in the clouds, but you can definitely see those low-bearing tropical moisture clouds. Not much in terms of wind in this area, but something to definitely watch out for is the rain all across St. Teresa, Florida. And then the next tower camera I want to show you is Mexico Beach. And this is one of those areas that has been affected with tropical systems over the past couple of years. Right now, earlier, actually, when I was looking at this tower camera, there was a lot of rain, a lot of rain droplets on the camera, but looks like the rain has lessened. And this kind of gives you a perspective because as that is nearing landfall, you are seeing a little bit of clearing, at least in terms of the radar. So not as much rain will be in association as we do get that center of circulation to go over these cities. So Mexico Beach, you might be seeing very light rain right now as we start to get more of that inland push from Tropical Storm Mindy. And then the next camera I want to show you is actually here locally in Orlando, Florida, just to give you a little bit more of a perspective. You don't have to be exactly where the center of Tropical Storm Mindy will be to get the effects of this tropical system. A lot of that moisture is actually pushed through the Tampa area. If you're in the Orlando area, at least here locally for us, we did see a lot of thunderstorm activity and a lot of torrential rain that came through with this system. And this is what usually happens as you get some of those outer bands to come inland. You do tend to see a lot of that rainfall fall for these kinds of areas. And then here's another perspective looking east. You can see a lot of those low clouds going in and out from our Orlando tower cameras, and our lenses are pretty wet just because of all that torrential rainfall we saw over the past couple of hours. So definitely a wet time if you're pretty much anywhere in Florida, as we are seeing the effects of Tropical Storm Mindy come into our areas, even here locally for us in Orlando, Florida. So I want to take you back to the app just to get a check-in on exactly where we're seeing that center of circulation. We are awaiting landfall of Tropical Storm Mindy, and if we take a look at what it's currently doing, earlier it actually did strengthen before it was making landfall. So earlier today when it was named, it was actually at 40-mile-per-hour winds, and to get a tropical system or tropical storm you need 35-mile-per-hour winds, but right now it's at 45-mile-per-hour winds, as you can see from our app, and our pressure is 104 millibars. So again, the center is about to make landfall somewhere in and around maybe Port St. Joe, as you could see here on our MyRadar app, and maybe even near Apalachicola. But there it is, pretty close there. At any moment we will get landfall. But right now let's check in on the winds and exactly what it was doing. Earlier when we were checking in, it was about 16-mile-per-hour gusts. So right now nothing too crazy. We're not seeing any sort of reports, at least in terms of damage, but something to be aware of, at least in terms of rainfall reports. So let's take a look at what you can expect if you are in these areas, at least over the next couple of hours. With our WSI graphics, we are going to see a lot of rain in some areas. Some isolated spots might get up to 5 inches of rain in and around this area. But most of the rain is actually going to fall in parts of the Pensacola area, and even right there where I was mentioning some of the inland areas like Tampa, for example, that are far away from the center of circulation, but you're getting those outer rain bands. Those areas might get up to 4 to 5 inches of rain. And then even in the Orlando area, you're seeing some of those blue and purple colors, purple up to 5 inches of rain possible. So definitely localized flooding is possible. If you're driving in and around anywhere tonight, just be aware of those conditions. You may get some localized flooding for those areas. So definitely something that we're watching. And also note, as it makes its inland approach, you're going to see a lot of that rainfall across South Georgia as well. And yesterday, the metro Atlanta area actually saw some pretty significant flooding, so they do not need any more extra rain on top of all that tropical moisture that they're going to receive. Although it's very minimal, they are going to see some of that tropical moisture up there. And then eventually in South Carolina, you're seeing a little spot of that purple shaded color. So as it moves overseas, that's when you can get even some more localized floodings near Charleston and in and around South Carolina. And then this eventually will be moving out to sea. So if we show you this tropical tractor, you can actually see the cone of Tropical Storm Mindy. So as it makes its inland approach, once it makes landfall, it will start to weaken, and then it will track into South Georgia. Savannah may get in on some of these winds and even rain, and then some of the outer bands might make it into South Carolina. And then as it moves overseas, that's when it will start to weaken back to 35-mile-per-hour wind. So that's a low-end tropical storm, and then eventually become a depression by the weekend. So really, this is a quick storm. It'll move inland tonight, and then eventually in the overnight hours into South Georgia, and then by tomorrow afternoon it'll be out to sea once again. The good news with this is it doesn't look like it'll strengthen anymore, so it'll be out to sea. But of course, it always comes with the risk of any rip currents and even some large dangerous swells, especially from what we saw with Hurricane Larry that's actually out in the Atlantic. If I show you here on this graphic, so you can kind of see how they're converging a little bit in terms of these forecast cones. But Hurricane Larry is still out there, category 2 storm, and I want to mention it because it also will bring in that dangerous swell and even rip current. So if you're planning on being out on the beach at any point during this weekend, maybe even the weekend, just something to be aware of. This is a risk that we're also tracking all across these areas, just something to be aware of. But we're going to take a look again at what the forecast is. If maybe you're just tuning in and you missed the forecast, here's what we're expecting. So in terms of rain, you're seeing all that rain later on tonight, the center circulation right over land and right over the Panhandle of Florida, and then eventually tracking its way into South Georgia. And by midnight and 1 a.m., it'll already be fully in South Georgia. But if you're in Florida, you're still going to see a lot of that tropical moisture, so you might get a few of those overnight thunderstorms in those areas. And then eventually by tomorrow afternoon, it pushes out actually closer to South Carolina, and then by overnight Thursday it might be pushed out to sea, and then you'll still see some of that lingering shower activity. Just something to be aware of. And we're going to check in and again on our tower cameras there. I want to check in on Port St. Joe and see if we can see anything out there right now. It was looking a little bit dark, but yeah, it looks like we are seeing just dark skies out there, and not really much to see. Let's go into the next tower camera, Matt, if you will. St. George Island. I want to check that tower camera out, or that weather stem. And again, these are provided by our partners at WeatherStem. And so these are really good ways to look at this stuff. But it looks like we are starting to lose connection as we are getting that nighttime. Let's check in on Mexico Beach. Could we get that? Oh, I see that up there. Yeah. So we're going to check in on our Mexico Beach camera, or maybe not. Looks like we lost most of our good tower cameras out there. But let's take a look at our Orlando cameras. We'll show that one, Matt. But we are seeing all that tropical moisture. It's still pretty rainy out there in Orlando today. You're seeing those raindrops on the lens. Ooh, you got to see a good lightning strike there in the sky. But again, I just want to point this out because this is important for all of our areas that are away from maybe Tropical Storm Mindy. You'll still get some of the effects in terms of rain, maybe even possible strong thunderstorms, and a lot of frequent lightning. So it's just something to be aware of over the next couple of days. But yeah, I'm sorry, we lost all those tower cameras. But it looks like we are getting close to that landfall. If we take a look, we're going to go back to our MyRadar app and just kind of check in on that center of circulation. So it looks like we're almost there, very close to making landfall there, near Port St. Joe, even at Apalachicola. Right now, they are seeing some of the quiet part of this system because the eye is actually going over some of those areas. But if we take a look at what it's currently doing, if you're just now tuning in, maybe want to get a quick update on Tropical Storm Mindy. It was named earlier today at the 5 p.m. advisory. So it's been a good 3.5 hours since we've had Tropical Storm Mindy, but it did make that center circulation, or did come together over the Gulf of Mexico, because we do have pretty warm waters out there, and a lot of the ingredients were in place for this to happen. And right now, 45-mile-per-hour winds. And we do also have a couple watches out in place and even some warnings. Tropical storm conditions all across our Panhandle region. So I'm going to kind of fade this a little bit so you can see what areas are seeing these alerts. And you're seeing this stretching from Apalachicola all the way to even parts even parts of Carabel there. So all across the Florida Panhandle area, all the way to some inland areas are seeing some of this. But if we take a look at our tropical storm warnings, this goes at least until later tonight. And so just something to be aware of. You will see tropical storm conditions. And what this means, tropical storm conditions, is you can see wind gusts up to 45-mile-per-hour winds in some areas, but especially you can't forget that inland flooding threat. So it's just something we're watching very closely as we are waiting tropical storm Mindy landfall. So of course, this tropical storm warning, tropical storm force winds. And if we take a look actually at my WSI graphics there, all these winds possible up to 30 to 40 mile per hour winds in those areas, and definitely something we're watching very closely. Nothing official about what's happening in terms of landfall with tropical storm Mindy, but it's very close to there. So again, if you're in any of these areas, you might be experiencing some pretty gusty winds. Maybe you're out there vacationing. If you're trying to plan ahead for your week, after today, you'll still see some of those thunderstorms coming in around, but Mindy will be out of the area at least heading into the overnight hours, and especially by Thursday. So just something to be aware of. This is pretty quick. It'll move over the area, and it did form just earlier today. But you're seeing some of those outer rain bands. Like I mentioned earlier, some areas, even around South Georgia, they're already getting in on some of this rain. Right now, we don't have any warnings in association with this. So typically when we get some of these landfalling tropical storms, you could see a little bit of rotation, which means a little bit of those quick spin ups in terms of tornadoes. But it doesn't look like we're seeing any of that so far right now. But we are going to see some of that torrential rain. Another factor, or something else I want to talk to y'all about, is we are also seeing flash flood watches in and around this area. As I mentioned earlier, the grounds are very saturated in this area. They have been affected by several tropical systems that passed through over this hurricane season. So a flash flood watch is in effect, at least in these areas all across the Florida Panhandle. And you may get up to 2 to 3 inches of rain. Some isolated spots are even calling for 4 to 5 inches possible. So localized street flooding, definitely a possibility. So just something to be aware of. So we have the threat of flooding. We also have the threat of wind, and of course, localized flooding on the roadways. So just checking in on our radar, and you can see kind of the center of circulation there, and taking a look at our track through the MyRadar app, and you can see there's already some marine warnings posted all across the west, or I should say the east coast of Florida. So a lot of these rain bands are actually reaching areas all across the Tampa Bay and even Orlando. You're seeing in on some of that moisture. That was those cameras we showed you earlier from here locally from our MyRadar studios, and you're even seeing some marine warnings. So maybe you're a boater, you're planning your day out, definitely watch out for those high waves. Like I said earlier, this actually can be combined with what we're seeing with Larry out in the open waters. And Larry was actually bringing some dangerous surf and rip currents all across our East Coast beaches. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing all these types of conditions out there, especially out in the Northeast. And they're actually seeing a bit of severe weather there today. If we check in on that really quickly, severe thunderstorm warnings remain in effect, but right now, nothing, at least in terms of severe weather in those areas. So checking in again on where our center circulation is for tropical storm Mindy. You're seeing it almost there. I think we're about to get a landfall here within the next couple of minutes in terms of tropical storm Mindy, but this will eventually weaken as it hits over land, and then we'll see a lot of these areas see a lot of rain. And Matt, do we have any of our tower cameras back that we can check in on? I'm not sure if we have any of our tower cameras that. Okay. We had a couple tower cameras out there in the Florida Panhandle area, but we did since lose the signal for them. And a lot of them too, since they're on Central Time right now, we're on Eastern Time, and sunset has already passed. So a lot of them do look dark, so we can't really see or have any good images of what's going on out there. But here locally, we are seeing a lot of that thunderstorm activity and rain activity. So Again, I just wanted to make y'all aware of these conditions. At any moment, we'll get landfall of Tropical Storm Mindy. It's very close. Again, tropical storm conditions will continue at least through the rest of the evening if you're anywhere from Apalachicola, Port St. Joe, and Panama City's even getting in on some of these torrential rainfalls there. So just be aware of localized flooding that could be possible. I always want to stress this because I think flooding isn't taken sometimes as seriously as other impacts from tropical systems, but flooding definitely always an issue. We don't really have much of a surge issue with this, as winds are only gusting up to 45 miles per hour, but that's something to also be aware of because winds could gust even higher than that in some locations. But 45-mile-per-hour winds, definitely a big risk factor there, and then a lot of heavy rain in those areas, and a lot of these might be associated, maybe even get some thunderstorm activity with these tropical storms in and around the center of circulation and even across our outer band regions. And that's where you're seeing some areas all across even South Georgia. Some of those areas are getting in on the rain right now. You could see it in Tifton, Georgia, Albany, Georgia, Douglas, and that may be even going into parts of southern Macon. So just some areas to be aware of. And if you're in the Georgia area, we're going to take a look, another quick final look at what we can see over the next coming hours and with Tropical Storm Mindy. So all that moisture will be moved in at least by 9:30 this evening. And you can see some of the outer rain bands, like Tampa, for example, where you're seeing those purple and red colors. Those signify some pretty strong storms. So if you're in those areas, just be aware a lot of lightning is also possible. So when you hear thunder roar, make sure you go indoors if you're anywhere by the beaches. And then as we get into the 10 p.m. hour, you're seeing that center of circulation right over South Georgia. A lot of that moisture coming into South Carolina as well. And then as we head into Thursday, 4 o'clock p.m., you're seeing, or I should say 7 o'clock a.m., more of that tropical moisture. So none of this is actually in association with the center circulation, but it is all the tropical moisture behind Tropical Storm Mindy. So just something to be aware of if you are in those areas tomorrow morning. It is going to be raining from Panama City to Apalachicola to even Tampa, Florida, and then areas in South Carolina like Charleston, for example. And then as the rest of your day goes, Thursday looks like we're just going to be socked into this tropical moisture feed. And we're also going to see some of those dangerous rip currents all across those areas. But taking a look at what rainfall totals you can see before we wrap this up, 3 to 5 inches is definitely not out of the water, especially across the Florida Panhandle where you're seeing those purple and blue shaded areas. And then also for some of our inland cities like Orlando and maybe even the East Coast beaches of Florida, that's where you're seeing some of that more localized 3 to 5 inches of rain. And especially out in South Georgia and heading into South Carolina, that's where you're seeing some of those higher rainfall totals. So definitely watching for this landfall here for Tropical Storm Mindy. Let me check in on any updates here. And so right now, nothing official, at least in terms of that landfall, but we're getting really close there. And you're seeing that center of circulation, if we take the MyRadar app there, right over Apalachicola. So it actually might make landfall in between Port St. Joe and Apalachicola there. And you can just see that center of circulation. So it's Apalachicola right now, should be clear in theory, but then you're seeing all those rain bands coming in there for those areas. So just definitely something we're watching, but just take a look at that radar feed. And if we put in maybe some, let's put in some IR feed in here, just to get a different perspective. We'll just do some water vapor there. Let's see. And then we could toggle that on actually using our clouds layer feature. And if you go into that feature, you can actually change out the different kinds of cloud layers. Although this is a static image, you can kind of see all of that moisture in association with Tropical Storm Mindy. And if we take a look at our water vapor imagery as well, that's where you're seeing all of that tropical moisture right now. So definitely we'll see some of those, I think we'll see some of those higher rainfall totals in and around where that center of circulation is, and especially those areas that are under those tropical storm warnings, flash flood watches, and even rip current statements looks like going up for those areas. So if we toggle back on our radar, and then we can check, actually, we could toggle on a different radar just to get a different angle of what Tropical Storm Mindy looks like. And then if we increase the opacity, just so you could see it better, there it is. And in Apalachicola, you can kind of see the cities there, but you could also see the track. And then, of course, especially by Thursday, it'll be out in the waters and you won't really see much of it, at least inland, but a lot of that moisture will still linger. And of course, always tracking our tropical or Hurricane Larry. It's still category 2. It has weakened a little bit, but of course, all these impacts in combination with these two, they're going to cause some pretty dangerous surf and even some rip currents in and around these areas. So just something to be aware of as you head out in the next couple days. But at any point, I think we should get a landfall of Mindy here, and it looks like it's coming really close to that landfall. So something we're continuing to track. Did we get any of those tower cameras back, Matt? Okay, we'll check in on the Orlando camera and see what's happening out there, just to get some of that rainfall perspective, because I do like to stress that, especially with all these kind of tropical systems in the outer bands. And you can see kind of the city sky, or I should say the city lights, are really doing a good job of illuminating the clouds there. And so you can actually see some of those tropical clouds in the area. Although right now it's not raining, we did have a few little raindrops on the lens. You can see the roof is pretty wet. There were some pretty significant thunderstorms over this area earlier, but right now we're not seeing any of that. And those storms have pushed through, and especially when it becomes later in the evening, you don't get those thunderstorms as robust as you do when you have them during the day. But of course, checking in on our radar one more time, it looks like we're going to get really close to landfall here. Let's see. Hello, Carol from Live Oak, Florida. Sandy from Kissimmee. Just checking in on our feed. Let's see. Yes, a lot of rain in South Carolina. You're still seeing a little bit of that. I'm going to see even more rain, actually. If you're in anywhere from Charleston south, a lot of that rainfall will actually reach you. You'll get about maybe some isolated spots might get up to 5 inches of rain in these areas, but definitely something just to be aware of is all the rain that you're going to get. And maybe you want to plan out your morning commute. So we're going to check in on our Futurecast radar. And right now, a lot of rain, especially across the Panhandle, but then all that rain will move through. So heading into your morning commute, Tropical Storm Mindy will be inland in South Georgia. So by 5 a.m., a lot of that rain will actually be centered over South Carolina, Charleston, and even some areas inland in South Carolina. Savannah will get in on this rain. Jacksonville as well. It'll be a pretty stormy morning in those areas. Maybe an early wake-up call before you go to work for your Thursday. And then especially across our Florida beaches. And then that eventually we'll see a lot of that tropical moisture linger from behind that. And checking in on our winds really quickly, see if they have picked up. So it looks like we're still seeing 16 mile per hour winds there in Apalachicola. So we're just gonna wait for this landfall of Mindy, and should be any second. I'm not seeing any updates from the NHC so far, but I think since we really don't have a lot of our tower cameras to show, I'm gonna end this Facebook Live, or I should say this live in general. But I hope this helped, at least in terms of plan. There is a lot of rain that's going to be in association with it. So if you are anywhere across the Florida Panhandle and even parts of inland Florida like Tampa or Orlando, you will see a lot of these rainfall impacts. You're in South Georgia and even South Carolina, you'll see a lot of rain in association, especially if you're closer to the coast, in association with Tropical Storm Mindy. But of course, right now it's 45 mile per hour winds. You may see some of that across the Florida Panhandle. It'll make landfall here pretty shortly, if not already, and we're just waiting for the official call from NHC, but looks like it is making landfall as we speak, as that center of circulation is right over Apalachicola, in those areas. And Apalachicola is not in on the rain right now, but anywhere around those areas, you will see some of this rain. And then that'll eventually push across South Carolina and then back to sea. And once it goes back to sea, it'll actually weaken, and then we'll see what it goes from there. But If you're tuning in tonight, thank you for tuning in. We'll keep you updated on any impacts that Tropical Storm Mindy will bring for Florida, and even heading into the next couple days from this storm system, especially as it tracks into Georgia and South Carolina. So if you're in these areas, I hope you're staying safe tonight, and have a good night, y'all.